Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be discussing section 10.5, Solve Quadratic Equations by completing the square. This begins on page 663 of your textbook. So if we're solving these quadratic equations, keeping in mind that quadratics are functions that produce a graph that's in the shape of a parabola. Alright, when we're solving them, we're solving for these x values when the function equals 0. Alright, which means we are looking for what are called the zeros, or what are called solutions, or our x-intercepts. Alright, so these x-intercepts are really important in terms of a graph or in terms of a problem, because that's when time runs out, or that's when money runs out. Alright, so those are important points to keep in mind and important points to find. So, completing the square. For an expression in the form x squared plus bx, which means we're looking for expressions with the leading coefficient of 1. Alright, you can add a constant, c. Alright, so we're looking to find a constant to add to this expression so that it can become a perfect square trinomial. Alright, and if you don't know what a perfect square trinomial is, go ahead and look in the back of your textbook in the index or in the glossary and find that, and then, familiarize yourself with that term. Alright, so we're looking for something that can easily factor. Alright, and if, I end up being able to factor it using this formula, I'm going to actually there's kind of this middle step here. I'm going to be able to factor it into x plus b over 2 times x plus b over 2, which means that it is then x plus b over 2 squared, alright? So that's what it means to be a perfect square trinomial. It can factor into a square of the same factor. Alright, and how we get there is we need to confirm that the leading coefficient here on the x squared term is 1. And then whatever this b value is, the coefficient to x, we're going to take that b value, divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. Alright, and then when we factor it, b over 2 is the value I fill in for my perfect square trinomial once I factor it. So let's look at an example. Complete the square. Find the value of c that makes the expression x squared plus 5x plus c a perfect square trinomial, and then write the expression as the square of a binomial. Alright, so step 1, find the value of c. So very explicitly, c is going to equal b divided by 2 squared. Alright, so when I do that, I take 5 divided by 2, since b is 5, and then I square it. Alright, so very explicitly here as a fraction, I would get 25 fourths. If you end up converting that to a decimal, that's fine. However, in order to factor it nicely, we're gonna, keep these as fractions. That's how Miss Hlebiczki, and that's how the book wants it. But 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. And then when you square 2.5, you get 6.25. Alright, so if you see, a fraction in your problem, you're going to want to keep fractions. If you do end up having a problem with decimals in it, you might add it and convert it to decimals. Alright, so step 2. Now that you found c, write the expression as a perfect square trinomial. So trinomial, 3 terms. So I'm going to add in that c value right here. Alright, substituting in 25 fourths for c. And then, last but certainly not least, I'm going to factor it. Keeping in mind that what ends up in this position was that b over 2. Alright, so b over 2 could end up positive or negative. And that b over 2 squared, that's always going to end up positive. Alright, so whatever b over 2 is, that needs to be right there in that position. Alright, so there's a couple of guided practice. Before we get to the guided practice and completing those, I do want you to think about a way to double check this. And a way to double check it is to take that binomial squared, and what you can do is expand it. X plus 5 halves times x plus 5 halves. And then when you go through the FOILing process, x squared, and then O, that's plus 5 halves x, I plus 5 halves x, and L last. Alright, 5 halves times 5 halves, 25 fourths. And then when you add those together and combine your like terms, you get x squared, and that becomes, these two terms, is 5 halves plus 5 halves is 10 halves, or 5x plus 25 fourths. Alright, and that is actually the original expression that you started with before you factored it. Alright, so if you FOIL out what you factored, and you're taking that binomial squared and you get a perfect square trinomial, that's just confirming that you factored it correctly. Alright, so here's a couple of guided practice for you to try out. Keep in mind you're trying to find the value of c, so explicitly write c equals, and then write the expression as a square of a binomial. So I should see something like x plus 1 quantity squared. Alright, I should see parentheses in there and an exponent as well. So pause the video and see if your solutions match. Alright, so there's, a couple of steps that we're going to be using. So the very first thing is you need to find that c value. What needs to be c? And then you need to add that onto the expression. So if we end up having an equation, there might be an additional d value out there on the other side of the equation. Alright, so we're going to keep that in mind, and we're going to follow through with this idea and fully solve for x by completing the square in the next video. So if you guys have any questions at this point, just finding that c value and factoring it, please let me know. Don't forget to reach out during office hours and really take advantage of that one-on-one. Alright, good luck, and I look forward to hearing from you.